one. Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, managing editor of Canada's Entrepreneur. Joining me today, taking care of business, is Kingsley Ma, who is area vice president for Remax Canada. Thanks, Kingsley, for joining us again.
Happy to join, Mario. It's always great.
All right, so the interesting report you folks recently put out, the Remax Next Neighborhoods report. Looking primarily at the Greater Toronto area and the Greater Vancouver area. But in terms of a key point or a main point that came out of this, what would you say that was?
I think the report was based on the reason why, well, first of all, is the reason why it's based mostly out of Vancouver, Greater Vancouver and Greater Toronto is because of the population growth in those two areas, the density, not just growth, but the density of those two cities, where it's become a lot, instead of detached homes and things like that, it's more so because of the condo and things like that that goes on. But there's a lot of infrastructure changes that's happening with those cities, whereas transit system, like, subways or SkyTrain, if you're living in Vancouver, for example, right? Also with that is that there's a lot of large developers, legacy developers that's, doing a lot of development in those cities. For example, if you're in Vancouver, you're looking at developers like BD, Concord, or Ani. Whereas Toronto, you're looking at Tridel or Greywood. Those the larger developers have been not only building towers, so to speak, but master communities. So they would go into an area where there's, at this point, there might not be much of a livability sense for consumers, but that's the ultimate plan is to build the master community. And also, we talked about growth, which also we'll talk about a little bit about affordability because that's the most important thing for all Canadians nowadays is where is it that I can live in an urban area and yet able to afford a place to live.
So, when we talk about these two areas of the country, and it has been no secret that, over the years, in terms of affordability, very difficult in both those markets. Yet, those markets grow in terms of population, right?
Yeah.
Many people want to live in Vancouver and want to live in Toronto area. Many of the immigrants that come want to settle in those places. So why do they still want to be there when prices are so high?
There's a couple of reasons, I guess. There's a lot of people that are moving from out of country into Canada, right? As you mentioned, and a lot. If you really think of the world's landscape in terms of real estate, first of all, they're already living in an even higher density city. For example, if you were in Asia, you would say like Hong Kong or Beijing or Singapore or Tokyo. They're already accustomed to living in condos, right? And if you're looking at Europe, then you're looking at places like London or Paris. They're the people that are moving in are already accustomed to smaller footprint. And so they still, even though they moved to Canada, they still want that vibrant urban life, right? So, and in order to live in that kind of vibrant environment, they still have to be able to afford it, which they can, because even though we have a housing crisis, so to speak, or affordability issue in Canada, but if you look at those major cities in the world, their price per square foot is actually higher than Vancouver or Toronto. So affordability is not the key issues for those individuals or families that are moving into Canada because they can sell their place where they are from and still be able to afford the places in those major cities in Canada.
Now, I know there was a breakdown of neighborhoods
Yeah.
in that those centers, but what makes a great neighborhood?
Livability. And livability ultimately means, you're within short distance, either walking or drive a couple minutes. Livability means there's parks surrounding you, schools, if you have a family, community centers and restaurants, of a choice. things like that. That's nearby where you live. I think livability is very important um, to people, right? Especially the younger generation, where they don't want to commute far to get what they want, right? Whether it's have a walk at the seawall or hang out with friends at a restaurant or sending their kids to school. They don't have to drive 30 minutes just to send kids to school. It's a little bit of a hassle when it comes to that kind of stuff, right? So livability is very important for any generation, not just the younger generation.
Now, one of the key things, in a community or a city, is the infrastructure. Now, when you look at Canada and you look at especially those two centers, are we keeping up in terms of infrastructure to accommodate the growth?
That's an interesting question. Infrastructure wise, I think Canada, the government is doing their best to accommodate the growth. It is always a challenge because I think the growth is especially the last couple years. Well, the last year or two, it's a little bit slower. But the years for decades before that, we've experienced significant growth in those two cities, and the governments in both those cities have been trying to put infrastructure. For example, like the train station, right, where they would go into a newer market. Market means a newer community where there's not a lot of density going on, but they would, where it's still closer to downtown or urban centers, but so they would try to tap into those community, put in the power lines, the cables, and everything like that. And the critical part is the transit. How do we commute people from those not so urban areas or emerging areas to downtown, right? And a lot of times there are communities in closer in Toronto or Vancouver that have success. And this is why we've done this report to discuss some of those communities that are emerging. And a lot of them has to do with transit. It's as a start.
Yeah, exactly. Anything else, Kingsley, you want to mention?
Well, I mean, if you really look at it, if you're a consumer today and you're looking into, say, for example, if you're starting to buy a family or even retirement and you still want to live close to like a downtown area, what I would do is, well, first of all, of course, always talk to a real estate professional, but I would look at doing some research online on where the government is investing into as a community you may not think about it today, but those are communities that's great for consumers because if even if you're investing or living in it, if you're going to live in it, your principal resident, the value of that principal resident will eventually go up significantly just because it's an emerging market. Or if you're an investor today, your return on investment will get, your ROIs and cap rates will be significant higher a couple years down the road once that community's built up, right? So if you are a consumer looking to buy a home, it's great to look at those, do some research or talk to a realtor, and you'll get a lot of potential with where you're going to live in the next couple of years.
Okay, super. Thanks so much, Kingsley, for joining us today.
All right. Thank you.
That was Kingsley Ma, who is Area Vice President for Remax Canada. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, Managing Editor of Canada's Entrepreneur. Thanks for joining us today.